Hey guys, welcome back. After a long break, we are here again with another installment of the 706 podcast where we argue, discuss, and nearly kill one another over which movies belong in a list of 706 greatest of all time. So, after this long break, we've decided to start off with some recommendations just that we've caught over the break or wanted to kind of throw out there. So, do you want to start, Tony?
Well, I just want to say before we begin that it's been a long break, and I know our listeners have probably been anxious to get back into the receiving episodes in their mailbox every week. I've been receiving letters, emails from the fans, evites.
Now my mom is super pissed. She wants another episode.
So I've been doing some in my basement, dubbing all your voices, of course, just to keep the flow going, just to keep the fans entertained, and myself occupied. But I do have some recommendations.
We all do.
So after that intro,
yes, I'll have one of those for each movie. So there'll be 4 or 5 of those little riffs. So get ready.
One movie.
I'll just do it real quick. I can't pick one.
Go.
I can't pick one, Kirk.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. First movie of several. It's by Kevin Smith. It's called Chasing Amy. Next one, Queen of Earth. Hannah and Her Sisters by Woody Allen. Scarface, Brian De Palma. These are all movies I had never seen before. I'd never seen Scarface before, but these are the highlights. None of them new either. Predestination, that's 2015 one. Those are the big ones, really. Those are my favorites I watched over break. Also, World of Tomorrow. It's on Netflix. It's a short film by Don Hertzfeldt. Oscar nominated. It was only 16 minutes, so no excuse not to check it out.
Fair enough. I just have one. I liked Room. I saw Room over the break. It's making the awards circuit right now. Brie Larson is... I'm very smitten with her. I loved her in Short Term 12 as well as other things.
Scott Pilgrim.
I never saw that, but sure. 21 Jump Street, I think she was in. Yeah, she was. She was Dave Franco's girlfriend. But no, this movie's great. Chronicles a woman and her 5-year-old son stuck in a room, trying to get out of the room. Everyone seems to be okay with spoiling this movie. I never read the book. Apparently it's like a given that everyone's read the book. Well, I haven't. So I enjoyed the movie spoiler free, and I hope you do as well. Room is great.
I really, really want to spoil the movie now. Because
that's all right.
Yeah, I think it's decisions like that. That's why Tony's our least popular guy on the show.
I don't know. Did you get those fan mailers? Because that's something. All right, I'll say I liked Room quite a bit. That's a very good movie. I saw it as well. I don't think it will win Best Picture. It probably will not with the competition it has. But if it did win, I would not be at all upset. I think that'd be a very fine choice.
I think
you're going to respond to all our recommendations? Or?
Why can't I respond? I say like Room. I'm not going to...
All right. Let's get Connor and my recommendation.
Yours first, Anthony, or you?
All right,
let's say you're a host. I can go first if you'd like.
No, that's okay. I'll just go in order. I guess Kirk was a great choice. I absolutely loved Room. I thought Brie Larson's just absolutely fantastic in that role. I'm really looking forward to whatever she's done next. After that movie, I'm willing to give whatever a shot. But the movie I rewatched over the break is Bonnie and Clyde, the 1967 movie. It's a classic.
Our man Arthur Penn.
Yeah.
We reviewed his Little Big Man.
It's a classic. I think it absolutely holds up. Anyone who has an interest in a classic movie or a movie that's certainly one of the most influential of all time, at least in America, should definitely seek it out. I think Warren Beatty's great. Faye Dunaway's absolutely stunning and captivating. It's a movie that holds up, and I think should be watched 100 years from now. It's great.
Ditto. Hugely influential movie. As for me, I watched This Is Spinal Tap for the first time. Classic Rob Reiner mockumentary. Pretty funny stuff, and it's a movie I'd heard about for a long time and just never got around to watching, so I recommend watching it. It's really quite good. Very funny.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, so Tony, any comments?
This Is Spinal Tap. I've never seen Bonnie and Clyde.
Counter recommendations.
This Is Spinal Tap is a good movie. I saw it years ago, though. It's been a while. I'm a little rusty. I remember all the classic bits, though, just because they're so often repeated. but it is it's a good one. No, I'm not dissing the movie at all. It's one of those movies where you hear the same three jokes from it over and over. Just either they'll be referenced or you'll see clips on clip shows and
those old clip shows.
I love a clip show. You ever seen a clip show?
I'm not familiar. What are clip shows?
I don't want to get into
all right. Let's not get off topic too much. You know, we gave our recommendations. I just want to say that we all gave our films, and for Tony, less is more. I'll leave it there. You know. But now let's get to the heart of it.
There was a great Prilosec commercial I saw 2 weekends ago. It was really good.
I didn't like it.
You didn't like it?
No.
Think you'll be nominated?
Shocker. No, I hope so.
All right. So let's get to the heart. What our listeners have been waiting anxiously on the edge of their seats, our cliffhanger from last time. Kirk, he picked this movie that I nominated, and it is 2001's The Royal Tenenbaums. By the way, Amelie was also 2001, so I guess I could only do 2001 movies from here on out.
That would be a fun game.
No, but anyway, so for those who don't know, The Royal Tenenbaums is a movie about a family that's basically living out their adult lives. They were once heralded as geniuses or prodigies in each of their respective fields, only for the movie to show later on in their adult life that they're sort of suffering from this divorce that's been hanging over their heads for quite some time. And what happens when this father, who walked out of them when they were quite young, comes back and suddenly pretends to be dying of cancer. And the movie goes from there. There's quite a lot to it. There's certainly a good bit of characters for us to discuss, so I'll just leave the plot summary there. But for the listeners wondering why I picked this movie of any other Wes Anderson movie, I'm just going to say that I think it's the movie that, up until Grand Budapest, was most commonly considered Wes Anderson's masterpiece. It was, up until Grand Budapest, his highest grossing movie to date. Not quite that much. I think it was only just about 60 million, a little bit under. So that's interesting. And I think it's the movie that really blossoms Wes Anderson into some of these tropes, these kind of parodies that we see constantly online. They really come into fruition in this movie. So before I give my interpretation, the correct interpretation, by the way, I'm going to go to these guys and see what they thought. So let's start with Connor, actually. I'm going to get Kirk last. Just because you picked it. So.
All right.
What can I say about this movie? I mean, visually, so incredible. It did not disappoint. From what I know of Wes Anderson, I've seen his three kind of latest movies, I think. And I'm very fond of them. It's just amazing what he does visually, just all these vertical and horizontal lines that really it does look like a painting. Every shot does look like a painting, And as for the story, I want Anthony to convince me, because I think it was a great story, a real story. It had heart, for sure. But I wonder if that can rise above and whether we can extract from this. I think of Wes Anderson movies as stylistic, rather than very substantial. That's my prejudice, certainly.
Mm-hmm. That's a common
but
prejudice.
I would like to hear. I've never really gotten into what are really Wes Anderson movies about, so I'm curious. I think I need to be convinced to know that this is a great movie. But
honest answer, Tony.
Well, I think they're very substantial, but not at all stylistic. So I need him to convince me of that. But no, I really, really like this movie. More, in fact, than I thought I was going to. And I had, pretty. I don't know if it was high expectations, but I expected to enjoy this movie. I loved a number of his other movies, and like Connor, I've seen most of his more recent material. But I thought this is definitely one of his best. I can't say where it would rank for sure until I've slept on it, but I did enjoy it a great deal. I thought the visuals were outstanding. Just one of those things. He's one of those guys who, every one of his movies, he feels so rigorously controlled, where every single moment, every frame, even the audio and the editing and every aspect of it feels so just it's so considered and it's so deliberate, And that, I guess, some people, that would be a critique of his style. Some people think it's airless or there's no room for it to breathe. But I really like that kind of I like feeling that. I like feeling that this was something that was thought out and something that was planned deliberately. I like feeling like I'm in good hands, as opposed to for a polar opposite example, something like a Judd Apatow movie where the actors are improvising and it feels very loose, and that has its place as well. But I do like this sort of thing very much, particularly in comedy. because Wes Anderson's a guy who just it's like he takes comedy, but he uses it's very cinematic. It's an extremely cinematic approach to comedy, and an entirely I think unique one in the modern landscape. I think there's no one really. You know one of his movies immediately. You know it's his movie, and I thought this one really nailed the emotion and the characters and the story, and I thought it really worked. I really liked it.
Let's get to Kirk. You picked this movie.
I did pick this movie. I enjoyed it quite a great deal. Wes Anderson has always been kind of an amorphous figure for me. It's hard to really I know, like Tony said, I know what it looks like, what a Wes Anderson project looks like, but I don't necessarily know what he intends to portray in those projects sometimes. So this one, Royal Tenenbaums, I felt like I did know what he was trying to say, and I thought he said it fairly in a very stylized, humanistic way. It wasn't too. I never felt too detached from the characters. I enjoyed. I enjoyed the interplay of kind of. There was like the constancy of the parents, both in the younger and the older. I mean, obviously the younger is just kind of like a prologue, but you kind of almost felt like there was some sort of progression there without having, been put through it necessarily, except for a brief narration. So the character development is on point. I thought it was extremely funny, like in an ironical sort of way. I think he nails that sort of comedy. And it's very beautiful, like everyone else said. If I had to say one thing, I don't know. It's just like I wouldn't necessarily say anything, because I think this movie is great, and I think we need more artists who are committed to their craft like Wes is. He is what he is, like it or love it or hate it.
At this table, like it or love it.
Personally, a little bit eccentric, and kind of the idea of being weird for the sake of being weird, but I don't think that's true. At one point maybe I did, but having really kind of watched this movie and Grand Budapest, I can say that there is substance there, of a certain element, and I kind of agree with Connor that I don't know what the story did for me necessarily. It was I was kind of distracted by the bells and whistles and the nice editing and the great aesthetic, but the story was suitable, and the acting was great, and the soundtrack. I know people's soundtrack I'm digging, but no, the soundtrack really was great. They must have had to pay through the nose for all those licenses, because they got some great artists, some great songs in there.
Well, fun fact, Elliott Smith was supposed to do the opening song of Hey Jude, only for the studio to raise the price substantially and to make it unfeasible. To went way over budget, couldn't afford it. But all right, now that I got the unfiltered opinions out there, I'm going to say the other reason I chose this movie is that of Wes Anderson's, it's probably the one I'm most familiar with. I've seen it countless times since I first saw it in high school. Probably these guys know I absolutely love Wes Anderson, but I think this movie's just practically perfect. It's an absolute masterpiece, and I'm looking forward to trying to convince Connor over here and hearing what else these guys have to think. But as for the movie itself, I wanted to say, the Jarling Limited, Matt Solar cites, has an interesting point, that Wes Anderson is often focused, and especially in that movie, of these characters who are absolutely obsessed with control and making sure that their world is completely at the hand of sort of their vision and their power. And if that's true, the Royal Tenenbaums is about what happens when that control is absolutely slipping away, when there's one thing hanging over us and saying it's going to happen, change is going to be there. And in this case, it's divorce. I think the movie starts off on an interesting note. It's the Hey Jude violin basically going off, and the whole movie is taking place in that wreckage of the note. Hey Jude, famously as a song, is written by Paul McCartney for John Lennon's first son, who had at the time experienced trouble with his stepmom, Yoko Ono, and stepbrother. So I think, from the opening, Wes knows where he's going to take this and knows where these characters are going to go. So, I mean, we could go individually, character by character, but I think the best way to just tackle this movie, which is so massive and so filled with these kind of traits and what's happening is to just go at it at once. So what do you guys think about that?
Wasn't it also written? I mean, like he was trying to comfort his John Lennon's son because John Lennon was a shit father. Right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, that's going to get through the end of the movie.
Okay.
Divorce. It's interesting the way these characters are experiencing that, and we know by the end what happens when the dad comes back in their life. Yeah. But what do you guys think about that? Is that pretty much how you saw it, Tony?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd be able to put it in those words right now. I mean, that's the sort of thing. I feel like with a movie like this, a lot of the time, or a lot of his other movies I've seen, the theme is more like it's something I might feel kind of intuitively or subconsciously, but not be able to express. This to me, this movie felt, the turns of the story all felt like true to the world and true to the characters. And whatever theme arose out of that, I might have kind of discovered later or on a second view or thinking about it. But when you talk about control, I think that makes a lot of sense. It's a great example of kind of the form meeting the function, because I really believe that the aesthetic of something, or aesthetic of a film, or aesthetic of any work of art kind of creates the tone, or it's a crucial part of the tone. It's not arbitrary. You can't just discount it or say, oh, well, aesthetically it's whatever, but I like this because it's all part of the one thing. So I think it makes a lot of sense that Wes Anderson would approach this kind of story with this approach of super controlled compositions and super controlled, just the pacing of the scenes, the way it's edited, the way it's very deliberate, and the way he directs his actors even.
Well, let me ask Kirk, because Kirk actually made it an interesting question halfway through the movie, asking, is that cemetery that they're standing at initially a real place? And this movie is actually filmed in New York, but what's funny is we know it's New York because, we live here. Or I think most people would kind of, have a tendency to go, oh, that's probably New York. But what's interesting about this movie is these characters are placed in front of recognizable landmarks. There's an interesting scene where Ponyo talks to Royal Tenenbaum about how Ethelline is going to be marrying a new husband. And where is he standing? He's standing in front of the Statue of Liberty, covering it up so we can't see it. And I think that's an interesting way you were saying about this, Tony, is this world works perfectly for this movie because the movie's taking place as if it's in a book. The opening scene is the book unfolding. And we kind of get this idea that these characters are going to be coming first because the world that's here is presented as if it's the vision of someone who's only known of New York from a book or from movies, music. We get everything about the music and the literature around this movie is so focused on trying to recreate a sort of New York that seems learned secondhand. But how do you feel about that choice? Because you were asking about the graveyard and the building.
I think that's a fascinating insight. I wouldn't have thought of it in those terms. I would have thought that, of course there would be an intentionality with kind of obfuscating the New York landscape. I mean, we never really saw, I'm a sucker for tall buildings, as we know. I have a phallic complex, I guess. No, I'm just kidding. I've been taking too much Freudian psychology, but I didn't see any I didn't see any tall buildings.
There were no really overt.
He does a good job covering it up.
Anthony said that the house that they live in for most of the movies in Harlem, when they're on the rooftop or surrounding or adjacent rooftops, whatever, there's no kind of, you can't see the skyline. There were parts where they were in Central Park. I remember he was walking with the two parents were walking together.
Royal and Ethelyn.
Yeah. But no, it's really it speaks to kind of the genius of Wes Anderson that he can create these I don't know, these
worlds.
Yeah, these worlds and these motives and and he allows the viewer to discover what they mean. It's it's kind of like chock full of Easter eggs, if in a video game reference. But I can't really speak to specifically in great detail. But I'd like to hear someone else.
Well, let's. I don't want to get Connor out of this conversation, and I think we seem to be pretty positive or favorable at least. But what were some of your complaints? Because you were talking about the story.
My complaints, let me just get one point that I was just thinking of in relation to what Anthony was talking about. I mean, what I really love about this movie too, and what I was thinking about more even than the book conceit, which it is very book-like. Mm-hmm. It's a grand kind of, we portray characters who are sort of high society, It's kind of a comedy of manners, but with really high stakes. There's farcical elements to it that are really fun, kind of Code of the Woosters-esque. But what was really interesting I found about it was the kind of the timelessness of the setting. You know, we kind of get the idea that it sort of takes place in like maybe the early 1980s. Mm-hmm. But really it's this grand mix of kind of 50s, of 60s, of 70s, of 80s. You'll see it kind of all mixed in. And you'll also see, you know, the house itself is like kind of a 19th century house or a very early 20th century house. So it has this real kind of timelessness to it, which is on the one hand kind of the timelessness of family, which is kind of interesting because it's these characters growing up. And on the other hand, it's kind of the timelessness of the story and the movie itself. You know, it's a movie that does feel pretty timeless in that respect, just in terms of the brilliance of the design.
So let's just, because I guess we could, you know, speak as a whole. Let's zoom in real quick, and for me, the focus of this movie, outside probably Royal, the dad, is Richie. That's portrayed by Luke Wilson. I absolutely love his character. I think there's a lot going on to him. So if you guys want to talk about that or bring up anything, Connor.
Richie, I mean, I thought he was extremely well acted. You know, like I said, I'm now trying to think of good critiques. I'll have to think about that another time. I just want to get my praise out there. But no, I really love Richie. We see him actually transform. You know, he has this kind of classic, classic 70s tennis player look throughout the movie since he's a little kid. And then we see him, shave his head and trim his beard. It's very effective. Takes his sunglasses off. You see him for the first time. Pretty effective stuff. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought Richie was a very interesting character. Just a lot of the I like the aspects of his story with that are almost. There are aspects of the story that are almost surreal. That all fit into this Wes Anderson world. He throws in all these elements that are very they feel right within the world he's created, even if in another context they'd be really off-putting or bizarre. But a movie opens when he's just on this boat and he's been traveling all around the world on this boat. Presumably he's wealthy from his tennis career. And he has this crew and he's on this kind of mournful journey on this boat by himself, which I think is it's just totally perfect because it's sort of silly. That's kind of a funny, ridiculous idea. But there's also a real poignancy to it. It's very poetic.
It feels honest,
Yeah. It really fits, and also the whole thing with when we see the footage of when he, has his emotional meltdown or whatever on his last day of pro tennis. And again, it's just the voiceover is it's hilarious because it's not, of course, what they would never say. They're pointing out
Owen Wilson's brother and not Luke Wilson and Wes Anderson did that voiceover.
Oh, really?
It's their voices,
I didn't catch that. That's interesting. But so it's talking about how Owen Wilson and Gwyneth Paltrow are in the I'm sorry. Gwyneth Paltrow and Bill Murray are in the audience because they just got married, and it looks like he's crying. It's just what he would think the worst thing. This is in his head what they're saying. This is what the world sees it in. So it's very psychological almost, but it's very funny and it's very human as well. And I thought his character was the most affecting and the most the most empathetic.
Yeah, well, probably that I think is probably one of his most important. Probably the next, certainly I think more important to the movie and his character overall, is the suicide scene. Where I actually am curious to hear what you guys think about. But for me personally, suicide scenes are usually such a easy, I feel, cop out for kind of screenwriters or kind of stories to go. But I absolutely think this goes down perfectly in this movie. Mm-hmm. When Richie enters the bathroom where he goes to kill himself, it's the first time the tone moves from something warm and yellow to kind of taking off this blue, and it's
certainly a cold light.
And
you never get. That's a very good point.
It's reflected off his own white clothing, which is interesting because the one other character that we see besides the doctors who wears white is Dudley, this kind of
clothing.
Yeah, this kind of rather innocent though, but weird bystander. But the thing that fascinates me about Richie is that up until this moment, his mindset is really much like a child. He's the one character in the movie who never really had to deal with the full ramifications of divorce. I think they make it very obvious that he's kind of, in the beginning at least, the dad's sort of favorite.
Boy.
He is, Ben Stiller calls him Papa's boy. That's Chaz. And so he's not separated from the dad or sort of distance until or at all, actually, anyway. So when he goes to the bathroom, it's interesting to me because he's taking the news of Margot, that's Gwyneth Paltrow's character, and her adulterous sort of frivolous lifestyle, so hard, so much harsher than Wally Reclair, her husband. And when he goes in and we see this music, it's the music of Elliott Smith. It's one note. It's the same thing going on and on. He's a character who's never had to deal with change, at least, as I said, to the ramifications of the other people. So when he goes to kill himself, when he says, I'm going to kill myself tomorrow, if you kind of just take that on the surface, it's kind of a ridiculous statement because he goes and kills himself right there.
Yeah.
But no, he's effectively just killing the kind of first half that we're seeing, the one we're kind of left to fill in the pieces of his earlier life, and he's finally becoming the adult, or dealing with what should have been hanging over his head this time. That's one of my favorite scenes, I think, in movies.
I will say, however, this is a critique, but I can't say this is a whole this is kind of one of those likability questions, or whether this hero is a good hero, which isn't always relevant, but it did affect my watching of the movie. There's this thing about Margot, the character, who is a very interesting and fun character played by Gwyneth Paltrow. But I found that sort of strange, this thing where Gwyneth Paltrow's husband, hears of all her, basically gets all of the kind of the photographic or what have you. We actually see it on screen. It sort of plays out like a montage of all of her infidelities and misadventures. And he says, oh, she smokes, and he didn't know that she smokes. While Richie, kind of goes into this, like I said, into this suicidal spiral, which I thought was so kind of weird for that character.
For Richie, or
maybe it's a plot thing, but it just seems like kind of a strange thing that you would want to kill yourself because the love of your life has had affairs before or something like that.
Yeah, I mean it. For me, it didn't really make much sense, and I wish that, once I had seen that, it was like the cat was out of the bag. It's like, oh wow, that was a pretty gripping moment. Now we're gonna go back to these, frolicking and gaiety and and snarkiness, but and probably the ire of Anthony is raining down upon me. But it's like a dream, Things make sense within a dream. Once you wake up, they're like, what the fuck? Why was I on top of the Statue of Liberty? Well, it makes sense within the dream, and this world is definitely, it's.
I don't think that you can, but you don't critique your dream. I don't see that as a criticism.
I'm not criticizing.
Oh, I thought you were.
That sounded like a critique.
No, what I'm saying is it makes sense within the world that he's created. It doesn't necessarily have to be key.
Well, I find it a bit strange. This is kind of an outside perspective, I admit. It's not totally within the movie, but I would want a hero, and I think Richie is kind of our hero. He can make mistakes, of course, but he is kind of our grounded, our stoic guy, who has failed greatly, but is willing to make things right. He's kind of our righter of wrongs in this movie. It is just kind of a weird thing, but
that's interesting.
Also, it's the hypersensitivity to these kinds of social, questions, men versus women, that kind of thing. So
that's interesting, though. But I feel like, for me personally, I feel like the movie did a good job of establishing that that's this direction that we could see this guy going. In the opening scene, as a kid, the one thing that absolutely obsesses him outside of his dad and tennis is painting. And in those paintings we see Margot. And we know that this is a character who's very sensitive to what she's doing. Later on, when he first, as Tony was saying, in that tennis match, he has a complete meltdown that ruins his career. And what does he do next? He absolutely leaves it and jumps to the middle of the ocean, quite literally. He's on a boat. So when he comes back and that happens, it just, we know he's been suspecting this quite for some time. What's going on with his sister, adopted sister, that he wants to be so much closer to, and it can't.
Can I say, I love the, you talked about divorce as a huge motif. I think also adoption has to, he just said, and it's the idea of the family as a social, as an organizing factor, as a social clan, if you would. It's very hard to get out and it's very hard to get in. And one way you get in is you become adopted. One way you get out is you divorce. And then we also saw marriage, and we saw death, and we did not see birth necessarily, but it was. I thought it was definitely a critique on like the American family and just like. And how we, to the demise of ourselves, we'll stick by the patriarchal figure, and then we'll invite him back in, and death allows us some sort of sympathy and gives leeway to the offender, if you will. And it's like, once he said, "Oh, I'm not dying, but I'm alive," and they're like, "Get the fuck out!" We don't want anything to do with you. We only wanted to be around you when we thought we wouldn't have to be around you forever.
Real quick on the suicide scene, just to address Connor's critique of it, I initially, when it was going in that direction, I was kind of like, oh, this is surprising, but I kind of was like, I just went with it because I liked the scene and I
the
felt
scene
the emotion.
was great. I forgot it myself.
I will say that when you think about it, I think it makes sense because not only does he find out the love of his life was having affairs with all these men. Basically, he found out she also smoked. There's a whole dimension to her life. She was married to this dude in another country. There's all this stuff about her life he had no idea about. There's so much of her that's just locked away from him.
And he thought he was close.
He thought he was really close to her for his whole life. And there's this whole part of her life that is totally locked off.
He has no control over.
And also with his dad, who he also cared for very much and thought he was close to, his dad was lying to him as well. His dad was lying to him so he could stay in the house because he didn't have a place to stay. So effectively, the two people he thought he was super close to are keeping secrets from him and in a way betraying him. So I think that makes total sense.
Right, and further, just one other point is the dad he admired so much is the one who essentially is being separated from his mother. The sort of, Kirk was calling it a critique of the family. Well, then in this sense, the parents that we admire so much and we think are going to be together forever for Richie are not. So when he sees Margot, in a sense, if this is a movie about control or change, he realizes that, well, he's never going to have her, or he can't, and he never did if all this is happening around her, and he doesn't know. But, let's move on. I think we're taking up quite a bit of time. Any other comments?
Let me just say one thing. All right, there's one thing. There's the real reason I didn't like this movie. So they killed the dog, Buckley. Spoiler alert.
I knew he was going to kill the dog. I'm like, when's he going to kill the dog?
I'm just
the Wes Anderson motif.
I'm really sore about that. That dog was really cute, and I didn't like the replacement dog.
Sparkplug.
Sparkplug.
You thought it came too quick, or you didn't
nowhere
like the dog
near.
itself?
No, it came a little bit too quick. The dog was not the kind of dog that if you see Buckley, there's so much wisdom in his eyes. And anyway.
So for Connor, it's personal.
It's personal. So
the Buckley was very cute. I liked him more than the Dalmatian they got, but I don't know.
Maybe that Dalmatian's great. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't really know.
We'll save it for the sequel. Royal Tenenbaums 2, Rise,
the Royal Tenenbaums,
Revenge of Royal.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know how much time we have. So we
can wrap it up. We're at 33 minutes, so if you guys are ready to vote, I am.
No, well. Yeah,
that's the problem with choosing such good movies, Anthony. I mean, what are we gonna do? I didn't like the scene where Donald Trump ran on in his underwear and started eating a human leg. I did not need that.
Well, I mean, I completely disagree.
Or were we watching the director's cut? That's what
we have to think about this time period where Donald Trump was hilarious.
The studio demanded every major movie had a scene with that, so you can't hold that against this movie. You're holding against every other one. So
no, but do you have any other complaints? Actually, we're talking about the story. I'm just wondering.
My final complaint, and this is for all it goes for all Wes Anderson movies, is just. Once you figure out the trick of how the dialogue works and why it sounds so punchy and cool, it loses its luster,
Really? What's the trick?
Yeah.
The trick is basically whenever you ask a question, you say it like there's a period at the end. Why did you do that? You say that. You pause after each sentence you say, and there's other tricks sort of like that. Usually it's very kind of robotic, deliberate movements, which makes sense, or based on the rest of his ove. But there's kind of, like I said, it's a quirk complaint. It's kind of a thing that it's a really great effect, great trick that eventually it works really well. But if you've been overexposed to it, you think about it too much.
That's an interesting.
It sort of grates, but it wouldn't be Wes Anderson without.
Look
it.
at Anthony's eyes. All Wes Anderson's respect is going away.
No.
My final blow.
No.
My revenge.
I mean, and the dialogue, I mean, is absolutely something Wes Anderson's practically made fun of constantly. I'm sure SNL skits, parodies online, YouTube. But I mean, on one hand, this is a very storybook sort of movie, and certainly the rest of them following on are. So I kind of buy it. Not all of his movies, follow this to a T as much as Royal Tenenbaums do. But for me, I also kind of look past it because I understand that these are characters who are just absolutely absorbed with their own thought. They're absolutely trying to take time to say something that's not quite on their mind, but could be acceptable by the person they're talking to. When they're speaking of a question, the pause I understand is this other person trying to figure out what's the right or appropriate response for me to say.
Sure.
So
then they speak with such certainty, but sure, that's also...
or they're trying to betray just how clever Wes Anderson is.
And Owen Wilson, he did write the screenplay.
I mean, he got a credit, we don't know, but yeah.
Well, of course.
What else has he written? I mean, this was a great...
They were friends and they wrote it together. Why are you assuming...
Bottle Rocket.
Okay.
Rush.
All right. I mean,
I'll show you some links.
It's a weird dig.
I guess I just think of actors like drooling on themselves after they get out of sets. I got another movie.
Why do you assume...
Owen Wilson.
I'm joking, of course.
Okay.
Owen Wilson, conspiracist over here.
Never mind. We can move on. We can move on.
That's good. We'll save some room for later the commentary track that's hopefully to come.
Yeah. Yes, we got our Little Big Man commentary track coming next month, guys. Get hyped. But all right, so let's just move into the final comments.
Yeah.
All right. One minor complaint. I don't think Ben Stiller's character Chaz got quite the same emotional resolution that the other characters got. I didn't feel like, I know they tried to give it to him with his line to Royal, I've had a hard year, Dad, and that was a nice moment, but it didn't quite.
It was also the last one in the ambulance.
Oh, that's true.
And
yeah, he does see his father die.
He hangs out with his dad too, right before.
Okay, all right, never mind. All right, never mind. So all right, I'll vote it in. I'll say yeah, sure.
And Kirk?
Yeah, I pretty much said everything I feel on this movie. It's a great movie, and I think it's a little too... This is one of those movies where it's too early to really digest for me, and I know a lot of movies are like that, but I can't... like in 3 days, I gotta
we'll
put
do
it in
an
a
update
crock pot.
In 3 days, Kirk will wake up and say, "I hate it."
I'll wake up and just start writing feverishly.
We're basically eating raw meat right now.
Yeah, exactly. I voted in.
Well,
okay.
Did we convince? Did we?
Well, that's no fun. I mean, I have to say, Anthony, he made great points. He defended this movie deftly. I think it is certainly a great movie. There's a certain je ne sais quoi that maybe it's just not my kind of movie. It didn't transcend, and I could make that thing of, there's other Wes Anderson movies that are better, but this is a truly, truly great movie.
I like the French.
Yeah, so I'll vote it in as well. I don't want to be miss out on the party.
Unanimous. Was Little Big Man unanimous as well?
It was.
Cool.
There's two unanimous of our four.
Wait, who didn't vote in Amelie?
I didn't come out clearly, but I would have said no. It was kind of a marginal no.
Okay.
If one of you had voted no, I might vote yes. But because you both voted yes, and I kind of had some issues, I was like, no.
Well, guys, the important thing is I'm 2 for 2. Let's just leave it there.
2 for 2. He's the movie master.
Well, let's go to the fan favorite, as we say, and go to the suggestions for our 9th episode next week. So who wants to start? Should Kirk went last, so let's who was the last to go?
I think I was the least reason. Wait.
No, Connor only did
Hidden Fortress.
And,
yeah.
Okay,
Simon
so
Killer.
Tony,
no, I went least recently.
So Tony goes first. Yes.
This is tough because I had 3. I lowered it to 2, and I'm gonna do something a little different. This is a Korean movie called Secret Sunshine, and it's about a woman who is dealing with her grief. I watched this like 2 years ago. We pulled the IMDb to see the year and whatnot.
Is it a recent movie?
Yes, it is from 2007. Yeah, so it's fairly recent. It's on the Criterion Collection. It's one of those, But it's by Chang Dong Lee. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation, but basically she's dealing with grief and tragedy. and just shows how she kind of deals with that. And it's a very kind of a quiet movie. It's kind of a subtle movie, but it is a movie that I remember fondly. It's a movie that like I just thought of recently, and I'm like, I really enjoy that movie. Why haven't I thought of that recently? So I thought it'd be something a little different. First Korean movie.
What's it about?
So recent. I just said. I'm not going to say any more than that.
Well, I mean, you didn't really give much to go off.
Give me some more of the cast, please.
No one you know. It's not going to be.
You don't know.
There's George Clooney, Robert
Jean
De
Dujardin.
Niro. Everyone in Royal Tenenbaums is also in this movie. So.
Right,
Okay, no, I'm
Josh,
kidding.
Kirk.
Well, in my continued efforts to cure this podcast of
Real
unwarranted
quick.
pretension,
Whoa,
I am suggesting...
Kirk, real quick. Can you tell us what you're drinking out of real quick, just so the audience knows?
I'm drinking out of a 706 mug.
We have a mug with the logo.
Yes.
One mug.
Hopefully to
The,
be in the online
thumbnail
store.
you see is the what's depicted on my mug, and it has served me well. Thank you, Mr. Tony Maestro, for the mug. I did appreciate it.
Maestro Tony.
Now let me tear apart your movie choice.
No,
Actually, I know it's. I will suggest a movie. Like I said, trying to let's get back to basics. So let's have some fun. You know,
I had fun nights.
are we gonna fall into this trap of, you know, we're gonna start reviewing like Caspian Sea documentaries about receding algae? I mean, let's do. I got Crybaby by John Waters, and I was bringing this up earlier in the week, but John Waters is a brilliant man. He's written like 6 books, directed a dozen movies. Crybaby is 1990. It was kind of like a major motion picture. Like, it was one of his larger theatrical releases, starring Johnny Depp. Iggy Pop also makes an appearance. I mean, there are just some people that are like timeless in here. Like Ricky Lake is in here, and William Dafoe's in there for a little cameo. But John Waters is a really funny guy. He's known as kind of the Pope of Trash. He makes these real trashy movies and kind of like B real movies that I think are really good. I think in their own place. You know what I mean? When you try to compare them to something like the Royal Tenenbaums, there's no comparison at all. This movie is very funny. It's about kind of this greaser gang. It's almost like a play on Grease, the movie with Travolta, and he basically is in love with a girl from the what is it called? The academy, the charm school. So it's very much like a Romeo and Juliet almost. So it's kind of the clashing of worlds in the 60s, I believe it's set. It's very funny. It's musical. I think all the songs are original, and they're actually really great songs. And I asked my dad about them, and I was like, "Are you sure these songs didn't come out back then?" He didn't recognize them. So whoever wrote them is a brilliant composer. But nevertheless, go ahead, Connor.
Okay, I'm going to recommend, to go right for the kind of the nostalgic part of Anthony, I'm going to recommend actually a 1941 film. It's the first 40s film, I think. It's called Ball of Fire. It's directed by Howard Hawks, starring Gary Cooper and Barbara Stanwyck. It's a real fun movie. It's a real romp. Basically about Gary Cooper plays a young encyclopedist who is writing the section of this gigantic encyclopedia on English language and slang. So now he realizes his information is out of date. It's 1941 already. He's got to get out there in the big wide world, into the city, and learn about like how people are talking today. And it's really fun. It's a really cool period piece. Still a very well-made movie. It's still hilarious to this day. And it's a movie I don't see kind of recognized enough as a great movie, in my opinion.
You haven't seen any of these, have you?
I've seen like a clip or an image.
I don't think any of us have seen any of the other movies.
From Crybaby.
Unless I'm mistaken.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
So, if I'm going to rebut here, I gotta say, I'm pretty happy with the options here. I think you guys did very well. We've really grown up since our first episode.
I was worried you were going to recommend Spice World again, Kirk.
I was thinking about Josie and the Pussycats.
You could. It's
gonna happen someday,
It will
guys.
happen. I will.
No. I think these are all great choices. They're all very different. We've got different eras represented.
They're very different.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I thought they were being sarcastic. No, in the no, I think John Waters. I've never seen a John Waters movie. That seems like I think it's probably eminently discussable based on what I know of him. I'd like to do a Howard Hawks movie as well. I've never seen a Howard Hawks movie. What does my movie have on these? I think again, just kind of just something different. I mean, we already done one Asian film, but it was a Japanese film. It was an older Japanese film. But I think there's a lot of cool stuff happening in modern Korean film. And I think this is a movie that is kind of, I don't hear about too much, but I really do think is one of the better movies of the past decade. And it is very effective at what it's doing. So I do think, and it's something that you guys wasn't necessarily on your radars that you were about to see anyway. So that for that reason, I think it will be a good choice.
What was the title of it?
Secret Sunshine.
Secret Sunshine. See, I really don't want to see a thriller about a bunch of Koreans trying to steal the secret recipe for Sunny D. Like, I'll pass, honestly. It just sounds a little bit, I don't know, kind of like it's trying too hard. And as far as Hairball on Fire, I really don't. It probably doesn't smell as well as it sounds, and it sounds like shit. Just kidding. So I like my movie choice. I'd be fine with either of them. When was yours released?
2007.
Okay, so
Different eras.
yeah, different decades, everything all around. But I'll stick with mine. And if I were a betting man, and you're in Vegas right now, bet on Connor. All right, go ahead.
All right, yeah, I gotta say, I mean, Anthony can't lose here. I like both of these picks. I would love to see both of these movies, but I will say, just Ball of Fire. Probably we won't get around to it again. I mean,
This is the only time we're going to see it.
Play the violin.
no, I'm sorry.
It was double for me.
I'm sorry. It's a good opportunity. You know, it's not a movie that I recommend much. It's a movie that I love, but I don't think of recommending it. It's just a good opportunity to watch. I'm sorry, I don't mean to. It's no different than any other movie with that respect, but.
No,
Sorry,
it's
misspoke.
No.
it's a very difficult choice here. Like you guys said, I feel like I can't lose. They all sound interesting. I will say though, Kirk, when you started off in your intro, you did say you were going to try to veer us away from the sort of pretentious talk, and then you threw out John Waters. It's pretty interesting.
Have you seen a John Waters movie?
No,
It's
but
not
no,
like
but
a mainstream choice.
no, it's a very
intense.
it's interesting choice. That's interesting phrase of words. I'll leave it there. Tony's film sounds very interesting. I don't know too much about Asian film in general, let alone Korean cinema and what's going on there currently. For Connor, I absolutely love Howard Hawks. He's one of my favorites of the old period. So I'm tempted to go with that, but this is hard. I'm just debating in my head, but
He loves having all this power right now. He's trying to draw it out.
This might be the hardest one we've had.
No,
the
no,
hardest
no.
decision
I
we've
think
had.
this is
honestly.
This is, I think, the toughest. Usually, I feel like for whoever's in charge are like two good movies, or maybe just the one. But as much as I want to go with this one, I'm not, because I feel like I'll watch it on my own. And so Howard Hawks is out.
No.
Oh, wow.
And sorry, Howard. Sorry, Mr. Hawks. Oh God, sorry, Gary Cooper.
You and me, Kirk.
Yeah,
As always. We've been doing this dance for 1,000 years, you and I.
Mine's too pretentious.
So we've done 2000s. We've done what was your movie? Body of Lies. We've done we've done TNT, the USA Network.
Yes. Hey, Spice World was fun.
We've done some different decades, yes, but I don't think we've done early 90s, late 90s, so that's interesting. But and you just went. But I'm gonna go with you.
It doesn't
Kirk.
matter.
all right.
I'm going with John Waters, Crybaby.
Good job.
I do want to watch a John Waters film.
All
I'm
right.
interested.
You're
You
picking
guys
up.
won't be disappointed. Tune in next week. I'm not ending it, but next week will be a great episode. I promise you that.
Wow.
If
Thanks.
nothing else, I will strip nude. And you can believe me or you cannot believe me, but that will happen.
I think we should have one of us strip nude and they'll have to guess.
Yes, based on-
Twitter vote, Twitter
Yes.
poll.
Yeah.
Which of us was nude?
Well, let alone the Royal Tenenbaums is in the 706, and with that,
It's our fourth one, yeah.
halfway through now at this rate.
We're getting there.
Well, 12 episodes before we get there.
Yeah, that's true.
So, without further ado, goodbye, and we'll be back next week with John Waters and Crybaby.
Bye.
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 Alright, so this is our attempt at a Wes Anderson version of a scene from The Dark Knight. I killed Rachel.
I know.
I killed her.
You did.
Batman. You
Harvey
burned
didn't.
my face.
I'm
Are
sorry.
Are you gonna hit me?
I might.
Goodbye.
That's why they call me Two-Face.